The timeline may have dropped you off right in the middle of this video. I promise you, you want to go back one or even two to get to this point. I'm talking about Dr. Park Dietz, which was a name that Kevin Reddington brought up to one of the rebuttal witnesses, Dr. Avram Mack, who testified on Friday. He is part of the Park Dietz and Associate group. And Park Dietz, I'm just going to say, there is no one more biased than Park Dietz, in my opinion. And I've been giving you some examples. Last video, I talked about he testified in the John Hinckley Jr. case, but there's so many more that he has had his opinion heard. Next up is Jeffrey Dahmer. We've all heard Jeffrey Dahmer, right? He was a serial killer who killed and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. But really, it was more between 87 and 91, like the last 4 years were when he was really active. And he escalated over time. So he went from just killing and dismembering to necrophilia and cannibalism. I mean, I don't mean to sound facetious here, but seriously, when you're eating people for sport, can we agree you're a little cray-cray? Like, he's not starving to death on an island and having to survive. He's doing it for fun. And yet your analysis of him is that he's perfectly fine. He just has a porn addiction. Park Dietz interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer for 18 hours. And although others had said, and he agreed, that Jeffrey Dahmer was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a schizotypal personality disorder, I hope I'm saying that right, psychotic disorder, Dietz also found him to be articulate and rational, and that he could detail each murder. Dahmer actually told him that he keeps the skulls of his victims, and he wanted to build a temple out of them. Nothing weird about that. And then Dietz also said that I guess part of this 18 hours, they spent watching movies together. All of Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movies. They watched Return of the Jedi, watched Exorcist 3, and then they also partook in some gay porn. Dietz said about Dahmer was that he just had sexual disorders, that he was a porn addict, and he would drink himself to the point of intoxication before he would kill his victims. Largely due to Dietz's testimony, Jeffrey Dahmer was found sane at his trial in 1992, and he was convicted of 16 counts of murder, life in prison without parole. Now, I'm not going to argue if that's where he belongs or not. The point I'm trying to make is there is a pattern of behavior from Park Dietz where he under no circumstances seems to be able to think anybody is insane. Fucked up royally in the Andrea Yates case, and this is what Reddington was hitting on yesterday. He testified in the Andrea Yates case for the prosecution, and he got up on the stand and he said basically Andrea Yates killed her children. Is sort of a copycat, right? She had watched an episode of Law and Order, and in that episode, a woman drowned her children, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So that's what Andrea Yates was doing. Andrea Yates was originally found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But then it was discovered that Park Dietz was out of his fucking mind because that episode of Law and Order does not exist. There is no episode of Law and Order that shows what he described on the stand. So her conviction was overturned in January of 2005. She was retried, and in the second trial, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and she has spent the last 20 years in a state mental facility in Texas. Would think, I mean, it's one thing to say, well, I may have missed this when I was diagnosing her, but to say on the stand that she did it as a copycat for a fucking TV show that doesn't even exist, that should have ended that guy's career, in my opinion. Like, he never should have been called to testify again. But that doesn't stop him. Let's talk about Jared Lee Loughner, also a mass murderer, killed 6 people, including a U.S. District Court judge, while injuring another 13, including Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. This took place in Tucson. This was in January of 2011. Although 4 months earlier, Loughner had been suspended from Pima Community College, where he was going to school, because they felt his behavior was erratic. He was acting up in class. He was threatening people. This is 4 months before the shootings. 2 medical evaluations diagnosed him to have paranoid schizophrenia, and he was ruled incompetent to stand trial. And again, in May of 2012, he was ruled incompetent to stand trial. Then miraculously, in August of 2012, he was ruled competent to stand trial. It's a miracle. And at the trial, he pleaded guilty to 19 counts and he was sentenced to 140 years in federal prison. Now, although Dietz never testified, provided some analysis of this case and of Lochner's mental state, and his assessment provided the leverage needed to secure a definitive life sentence without an extended, unpredictable trial, because heaven forbid someone get their fucking day in court. You don't have to agree with me. I think Dietz is an extraordinarily biased person who never, ever, ever considers that somebody may be insane. And although he's not testifying in this case, and you're probably wondering, why the fuck are you telling us all this? Because Dr. Mack and the guy that's coming up next week, these are people who fall under the umbrella of Dietz and Associates. So anybody who's going to work under that umbrella is going to show up in court and automatically, I'm saying my opinion, be automatically biased for the prosecution. And again, I don't think you're an expert if you find it impossible to see multiple sides of a situation. I don't think you're an expert if you always rule the same way unequivocally. And I don't think you're an expert if you have to drag out all kinds of other explanations like that guy had a porn addiction so that you can justify someone's crimes. All right, I'll step down off my soapbox. We'll see you Monday in court.